going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. To begin with, Dr. Ledbetter, if you will introduce your family that's here with you tonight, and then we have some special guests that I was going to recognize before we get started.
Okay. My wife Kim is here, and beside her is my oldest daughter, Kira Aaron, who lives nearby, and beside her is my youngest daughter, Kelly Ledbetter, who's a teacher and a coach down in Smith Station.
And is that your son-in-law?
I didn't see him. That's my youngest fiance. He was they're getting married in May. So Jonathan Fisher, and he is also a teacher and a coach there at Smith Station.
Glad to have y'all here with us tonight. I also wanted to recognize we have two of our councilmen here. Listen to me. John Lyda, if you'll please raise your hand. And Admiral Jack Natter, if you will please raise your hand.
Thank you.
And then we have Ms. Paulette Pearson. Paulette served on the school board for 5 years. Paulette, if you'll raise your hand. She was past president, just rode off the board last year. And then also someone that's very interesting, Mr. Lester was the original board member with Hoover City Schools. If you will raise your hand, and I believe, Mr. Lester, your picture's on the wall up there. Hickman, I'm sorry, Mr. Hickman. But anyway, thank you for coming tonight. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
At this time, we're going to go ahead and get started. Let me just make a couple of announcements here. Dr. Ledbetter, you have your 15 questions. These 15 questions were submitted by the board members and also HPTC, which is our Hoover Parent Teacher Committee. Dr. Ledbetter was given the questions ahead of time. As we told him, or as I told him on the phone, I wanted to make sure that we weren't trying to make this interview difficult for you. We wanted to make sure that you were prepared and wanted you to have the questions before you showed up this evening. Gentlemen, if you will, the only thing that we've been asked is just to speak clearly into the microphones. We are live streaming this, and I think Brian Phillips just indicated that we need to make sure that we speak directly into the microphone. At this time, we have 15 questions. Mr. Kelly, I'm going to let you go ahead and start. Before we begin, Dr. Ledbetter, is there anything that you need from us? Do you have?
I'm fine.
Are you good to go?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Okay, Mr. Kelly?
Thank you, Madam President. Dr. Ledbetter, the Alabama legislature has just passed legislation to authorize charter schools. Will charter schools have an impact on a school system like Hoover?
The short answer is it's possible, but let me give you some detail and let me back up some. I haven't been in Georgia for the last 6 years. I've had the opportunity to see what Georgia has done with charters and with other things. And I was appointed to the Charter Advisory Committee in 2011 in Georgia. The only superintendent on the committee right now. There were 2 of us appointed at the time, 9 members. And we were appointed because we were becoming a charter system at the time, and I'm going to take a few minutes to tell you the difference between startup charters, conversion charters, and charter system. Charter system's a misnomer in a lot of ways. People think that it means the same as a charter school, but it doesn't. What charter system meant was that we entered into an agreement with the state to be able to waive all of state rules under Title 20, under the law that governs education in Georgia, in exchange for higher achievement. So we could have flexibility to do the things that we found in our system and in our schools that were good for our students. And to be able to do that in exchange for higher achievement. And it has been really a positive thing for us. Our school system has taken to it very well. Our teachers have taken to it very well. It's allowed us to empower our teachers to do what's right for students. We talk a lot about integrity because we believe that integrity is the first thing that matters in the school system. You can't build trust with your community without integrity. And so everything we do, we try to do transparently, and we try to make sure people know who we are and what we're doing. What I found is even if you have problems, if you're honest about your problems and you have a plan to address your problems, people understand that. Now, everybody has to work through problems. But having integrity and making sure that people know that what we're doing, we're gonna do the right way is critical. As part of that, the whole idea behind charter is that there are people who, frankly, from what I've seen and seen a lot in Georgia, people who are stuck in difficult situations, parents who find their children stuck in difficult situations, who want an out, they want an outlet. And so I think because of that, I don't think that Hoover is a prime candidate for charters. You've got an excellent school system. You've got offerings across the board. One thing in public education, we have to be committed to educating every child, from those who are headed to Harvard, to those who are headed straight into the workforce out of high school. Our community needs us to have every child educated, and educated well. We have to prepare our future leaders, we have to prepare our future workforce. But every school system or every area has a menu of educational options. And if we don't have a complete menu, then you may have people try to look for a niche that's not covered. What I see in Hoover is a broad menu of educational options for students to pursue, and a great school system full of professional educators who are working to make that happen. And so I don't think it's fertile ground for startup charters, and I think that what we'll see, and frankly, one of the biggest issue to me with startup charters is they take the easiest to educate students, the students whose parents care. Because frankly, the number one thing about whether that child gets a great education is do the parents care about the quality of education that they get? And if they do, then the second issue is there a great teacher in that classroom? And the third issue is there a great leadership in that school? And if you have all three, you've got a great education. My concern with charters and with charter legislation is that it's an easy way for legislative bodies to feel like they're addressing a problem in education by allowing this. But if we know that most kids don't leave to go to even a startup charter, what happens to the ones who don't leave that failing school? We've got to address those. And by that, I don't mean Hoover. I'm talking about across the board, the places where people are looking to charters as the answer. There's still those kids behind that as educators, we have to look at and say, we need to make sure we're doing the right thing for them. And so I don't see that as something that's going to affect Hoover in a strong way. There may be somebody who tries to come in and say, I'd like to start a charter school, but there has to be a lot of people who are interested in doing it to make it worthwhile. A lot of companies have run them and made money. Some have been really good. Some have been really bad. I've seen both on part of the Charter Advisory Committee. What I've seen is that charter schools are just like every other school, private schools, public schools, any other school you name. There are good ones and there are bad ones, and it depends on leadership and it depends on what's happening in that classroom. So I don't, again, in short, I don't think Hoover's prime candidate for that, but we'll see as Hoover continues to lead this state and what's happening in the classroom. I think there'll be even, there's less and less demand for that kind of an option.
Can I ask a follow-up question? It's going to lead a little bit over into the budgets, but you talked about a charter system, which includes all, 7 schools that you've got in
Yes, yes, sir.
Let's just narrow those down just a minute to the 3 elementary schools, which if you just set them apart, it looks like a charter conversion. And I understand that each one of those schools has a basic theme, if you will.
Right.
And that any parent within the district can send their kid to any one of those schools anytime they want to send it to.
That's correct.
How does that impact your budget, resource utilization, that is the infrastructure of the building, the overheads, expenses, and since it's in fact conversion, I guess you're still under the Georgia standards for teacher salaries and benefits?
Well,
unlike a new charter.
let me say a couple of things, and that is, they're not conversions because we're a charter system, but all those questions are still valid and still good. What we did, and let me say, what we've done in Dublin doesn't necessarily translate anywhere else. One thing I've learned is being on the Charter Advisory Committee, I've made 16 site visits to other charter systems, people who are becoming charter systems or renewing in Georgia, and there are no two alike. That's the nice thing about the flexibility that charter system gives, is that every community and every school is different. And you have to recognize that, and you have to realize what's good for for our students here may not be the needs, to meet the needs of students somewhere else. For us, we were, at the time, under had just come out from under, actually, our court order, our integration court order that we've been under for 40 years, or more than 40 years. I was part of that, and part of that as well in Tallapoosa County when I was assistant superintendent. We came out of that and had actually Mr. Sweeney's help there. And so I've been part of a couple of systems doing that. And so as we looked at our charter system and what we wanted to do, we had a K-1 elementary, we had a 2-3 elementary, and we had a 4-5 elementary. They had done that about 15 years earlier because they were trying to make sure and meet the court order for integration and not have any schools that were out of bounds. At the same time, it ran off 1,000 students because parents who had been going to neighborhood elementaries suddenly had to drive 30 minutes across town to get there. And the thing we heard as we did strategic planning was a lot of people saying, you know, we really want our neighborhood schools back, but we don't want to segregate our schools as part of it. So how do we do that? And if we drew lines, when nobody has had any lines, we felt like we would have a mutiny on our hands. And so every school system where we are has open enrollment. We all take students from out of district. And our parents are used to having choice. And they're used to being able to choose this district or that district. And so rather than doing that, as we put our heads together in strategic planning, we said, okay, we know that our students need project-based learning. We know they need to have relevance in the things they learn. And so let's have academically themed elementary schools where all the standards are the same in every elementary school, but the projects are different. And so we have 3 different elementary schools. One's a STEM school, science, technology, engineering, math. One is what we call TAG, Talented Arts and Gifted. It's really art. It uses all kind of arts, performing arts, and other arts to teach the performance standards. And one is what we call LEAP, which is Leadership, Environmental Awareness, and Public Service. And there we do a lot of work in leadership, and a lot of the projects actually get into public service type projects. And so the students are learning the same standards, but they're making a choice of where they want to go based on things they're interested in. When we did that, we let parents sign up and just choose. And I'll tell you, it was, when you talk about as a leader taking risks, there were a lot of people who told me we were taking a huge risk because we have a very high poverty rate, free and reduced lunch, and a lot of people said, well, a lot of these parents aren't going to come. They're not going to come choose. And a lot of people said, well, we're going to resegregate all the students of different races are going to go to one school or another. Well, it didn't happen. Our parents started lining up at 3:30 a.m. on Saturday morning when we were going to open at 8 to take enrollment. Our committees had done really good work and had really strong themes that people wanted, and they were very purposeful when they did it. So they put the STEM school, which they knew a lot of middle-class parents were going to want. They made it the school that was in the poorest part of town. And so people said, well, no, I want to be in the STEM school, so I'll go there. And so budget, well, long story short, 91% of our parents showed up that morning. Every single parent got their first choice of school that morning. We had a few more that had to sign up on Tuesday, and we had 1 or 2 who ended up going to the second choice. But the ones who could come on Saturday, everybody got their first choice. Every year now, at the end of the school year, we don't allow transfers during the year, but we allow transfers at the end. We've had less than 5% transfer each year. And so, if I've got 95% of my parents happy, I feel like we're doing something right. That said, budget-wise, it's been a wash. It hasn't cost us any more, but it hasn't saved us any either. We already were transporting most of our students. We're continuing to do that. And we just have to be a little more purposeful. We have to find out where everybody lives before we draw our bus lines. But it has worked for us. That was a Dublin unique fit. And I can't tell you that would work anywhere else, but I can tell you for us, when we got together and we put our heads together and we had all our stakeholders there, everybody looked at it and went, yeah, that works for us, and it has been very, very successful.
Dr. Ledbetter, why are you interested in leading Hoover City Schools?
There are a lot of reasons, and a lot of good reasons. First of all, it's a great school system. I'm not interested in working somewhere that's not committed to excellence. It's one of the things I love about the school system that I'm in right now. We have great professionals in our school system, just like Hoover does. They work hard, they're committed to the job, they want every child to learn, and we're seen by others as doing great work. If you look at our students demographically, and you disaggregate data, and you look at every identifiable group, we're doing better than almost anybody in the state by every identifiable group. But that's because of a lot of great work by a lot of great people. I didn't start that. I didn't come in and, I can't claim credit for it. But I want to work with great educators who want to do a great job. And so Hoover has that. So it meets that check mark for me. While Alabama doesn't have that ability to have a charter system and that flexibility, some of the things I looked at as I looked at your governance structure and the way that this school system's been run is I think it actually would be very friendly to some of the principles that I've learned as a charter system. And that goes back to starting with integrity first and transparency and people understanding that and building that trust. It goes to empowering teachers by letting as much decision-making be made as close as possible to the student and having as much decision-making made at the school level. We intentionally give away some of our central office power, quote unquote. I use that term kind of loosely, yes, that idea of power, but we intentionally try to empower our school people to make sure that our school leadership, I hold school leadership accountable for what's happening in that school. And I expect them to serve those teachers, to make sure those teachers are serving the students, and to make sure that in the central office, we try to serve them. So we try to make as many decisions as possible there. They know better than I do what's necessary in that school. And without a doubt, every teacher knows better than anybody at the central office how to meet the needs of every student in that class. That has to be done on an individual basis. And we have to empower our teachers to know that as they make decisions, that they're going to be supported as they make decisions with integrity for the good of that student. And one of the things that we stress for the last couple of years particularly, is, and I put it this way, whether for lack of a better term, breaking rules with integrity. We talk to our teachers about breaking rules with integrity, about going in there, and if you're doing something with a student, with your class or with your students that doesn't work, and you know it doesn't work, and you say, I'm doing this because the state or the school system told me I have to, and then that's the wrong reason to do anything. That if it doesn't work and we know it doesn't work and we know our students aren't learning, we need to adjust what we're doing. And then we need to assess as we move forward. And if we assess 2 or 3 weeks into it, we're still not getting it done, then we need to change again. But we need to make sure we're doing things that meet the needs of our students and that our teachers feel empowered to do that. Because if they feel like, well, if I do this, then I'm going to get in trouble, they're not going to do it for students. So we got to do that. We got to make sure. Now, let me say, when I say breaking rules of integrity, that doesn't mean do something crazy. That means I should be able to explain to my principal, here's what I'm going to do and here's why. And the principal looks at it and goes, yeah, that makes sense. Wish I'd thought of that. And as we see those things happening, we see things, good things happening within our classrooms. In our central office, we have a saying, we talk a lot about finding a way to get to the yes. Sometimes people come and in the old days, we had a compliance mode in the old days where it was all about I comply with the rules come down the pipe from the legislature to the state board, to the local board, to the central office, to the school, to the classroom. And rather than compliance, now we're talking about empowering those teachers, finding a way to where we can say, okay, yeah, now we can say yes. It may mean we have to change some things. It may mean we have to go around some barriers. It may mean there are laws we have to comply with. But let's find a way to get them to where they need to get to. And that's what we do a lot of working on. So seeing that what's already being done in Hoover, I felt like a lot of the things that we've done would be very similar, and it would be a friendly place for some of that I really believe in. I believe in empowering teachers. I am from Alabama. I have 19 years in teaching public schools in Alabama, teaching and being an administrator. I was 11 years a classroom teacher. social studies, history mostly, and government economics as well. I love my state, and frankly feel like that Hoover is one of those school systems that can be a leader, because it does look a lot like the state of Alabama. It can be a leader in not only changing and improving education right here for every student sitting here, but for this entire state. And that's an opportunity that you don't see in every school system. And then, and lastly, but not unimportantly, it is close to my family. And it does put me close to my grandchildren, and also much closer to my parents as they age. And so those are important pieces too.
Thank you.
Following that response, I think this would be an appropriate question. Outside state and federal mandated testing requirements, what internal indicators have you implemented to determine student success?
Several, because it is important that we have accountability and that we know where we are and what we're doing. Aside from the state and federal mandated testing, we do benchmark testing on a regular basis to make sure that all of our students are moving in the way they need to be moving, and that we're adjusting when they're not, and that we have plans to address those when those happen. We also have worked very hard to make sure one of our objectives is that everybody graduates, but to do that, everybody has to maintain grade level. So we're checking each year, where are we falling behind, and what are we doing when those things happen. Some of the things we've been able to do because of that is we've used our flexibility to have some things like between grade classes, where we've taken a group, for example, of kindergartners who were behind and not maybe ready for first grade, and instead of saying we're gonna hold them back a year, we said, okay, let's have a K+ class as far as, and so they're not going back and restarting kindergarten. They're starting where they are and continuing, and by the end of the year, we've moved them to where they're ready for second grade. So we've done some things that are different to do that as we look at the testing that we do. I'm a big believer in, we forget too quickly that all of our teachers do ongoing assessments, whether it's classroom tests and whether it's the informal assessments that they do as they teach during each day, as they work and interact with students. And that's really the first assessment that we've got to be looking at and making sure that those things are happening. Another thing that we've done is we track our students after graduation, because frankly, what makes us know if we're successful is what are our students doing 5 years after they graduate. That's really what matters. Graduation is not the be-all and end-all. Graduation is a step along the way to a successful life. We know that if we're successful 5 years after graduation, they're going to be employed somewhere in their field of choice, or they may be in the midst of their education for their field of choice. As long as they're in one of those places, we feel like we're doing what we need to do. But it's very important that we follow those. We also have worked to follow those who don't finish. One thing, a statistic that we found is that 70% of those who drop out of school before we graduate from high school never leave the area. They stay within 10 miles of the school they dropped out of. So it's critical that we address those issues and that we address those students as well. And we've put in some programs, GED programs that we don't actually get any real funding for from the state, but that are critical to make sure that we're addressing the needs of our community in that way. Another way is through our balanced scorecard that we have with our board, where we put on there not only our test score information, but also any other thing that our board feels are important. It includes construction projects and being on time, all those things. It's a one-page document. You can see the front and the back, and each year we give that to our board. We fill in all the information. You can see where we were last year, what our goals were for this year, did we meet them or did we not, and then we talk about our plan for where we go from there each year.
Can I ask a follow-up?
Sure.
You mentioned two things that you keep each student accountable by following up with them on a yearly basis, and then you track them after graduation.
Yes.
How does that transfer to a system of 14,000 plus students?
Well, I'm not going to say that somebody doesn't fall through the cracks, but what we do is before graduation, we get information from them, and then there's follow-ups with them through email, and at least annually, they receive a written survey of what they're doing, and they have to give us that information by survey. So it's not a perfect system, but it's a system that allows us to have a pretty good snapshot of overall where we are.
Was, in that particular system, I'm assuming you send it out via email, whatever form, what's the percentage of seniors that give feedback back? to
Well,
that?
of course, it goes down each year.
Right.
So when they're graduating, of course, we've got them, they're a captive audience.
Right.
But each year it drops by 4 to 8% each year, and so, but we've still got a pretty high group by the time. And we're now in our 4th year of tracking, so next year will be year 5. So each year it's dropped by somewhere between that range.
Dr. Ledbetter, how do you envision your role or your relationship with our city leaders?
It's critically important. I really believe that public education, we talk a lot in education, and it's true and it's important. It's all about the students and student learning, and it is. But it's so much bigger than that. It's so much more than that. And it's why when people pay their taxes for education, it's not tuition. It's so much more, because public school is about being part of the economic fabric of our community. We have to be receptive, and we have to work together with our community leaders. We have to see what the needs are and make sure that we're meeting them to the best of our ability, not only to put a workforce out that they're looking for, but what are the needs? What do they need from the school system? Because it's different in every community. In our particular community, our community is very aggressive in going after industry, and we've done several things to help with that. We've actually, they now have us at the table to recruit industry, because we've been able to help with that as we put in our IB program, because we know international executives particularly like IB. They don't really trust American schools all that much. They think we're a little sloppy, and they like IB and they like the idea of it. And in the last 3 years, we've landed, in the last 4 years, we've landed 3 European companies that have come to Dublin, 750 jobs, not because of the school system, but they wouldn't go anywhere that didn't have IB. And so, when we can help our community in that way, and we look and they say, well, as small as you are, how do you support IB? How do you say you can spend the money for that? Well, my answer is, how can we not? That's what our community needs. So when we look and we see what our community needs and we help them in that way, it's critical. At the same time, being involved in civic and community organizations is very important, and getting a personal relationship with those community leaders, because a lot of the times when you start to learn and talk in informal sessions is when you hear about things and you start to realize, hey, we can do something about that. We put in our Career Academy specifically because we can help train the workers that industry in our area, both those that are existing and those that are looking to come in, need. And if we can reduce their labor costs through our school, then that becomes a great recruiting tool, or a great reason for people to stay where they are with us. So listening, finding out what you can do, because our community leaders didn't know we could do that until we heard that was something they needed, and we said, oh yeah, we can address that. But that comes from relationships, from talking with each other, and from being involved with each other. I really stress to all of our leaders being involved in civic organizations. I think it's important that it's not, the superintendent is, the face or the personification of the school system. Leadership throughout the system it's important that we're all embedded in our community, that we're all pieces of it, that we're hearing what's going on, and we're able to affect what's happening in the community for the good of the school system and for the good of the community. My assistant superintendent right now is the chairman of our development authority. That's never happened before. They never had an educator-owned development authority until he went on 2 years ago, and now he's the chairman of the development authority. I have central office personnel and principals involved in civic clubs, and Dublin has a very active civic groups throughout, and to be part of the leadership in them is very important, and be able to know what's going on and be able to help our community. community. So there's not a single piece, it's an interwoven, constant approach to saying, how can we serve our community? What does our community need? And then making sure that we're addressing that.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Kelly?
Dr. Ledbetter, Hoover expects and demands excellence in everything we do. How do you balance academics, fine arts, athletics, and other extracurricular activities in the district?
Well, that's one of the draws, I guess, for me, because I come from a school system that feels the same way. They want us to be good at everything. Frankly, if we do it, they want us to do it well. And now let me, to help our students be as good as they possibly can be, no matter what we do. And so we talk a lot about the fact that our extracurriculars, all of our extracurriculars, are our front porch. They're not who we are and why we're there, but they're the first thing people see. And you want the front porch to look nice when somebody drives by, somebody comes walking up, because it's their first impression of the school system. So we want to do a good job with everything we do. We want to do it the right way. At the same time, it's also the best guarantee of the student's graduation. Students have to be involved. They have to have relationships at the school, and they have to feel like the school is home and they're connected. One of the best ways to connect is through extracurriculars. And there are students who, when they're in 7th grade or 8th grade or 9th grade, they may not even realize why they're there. By the time they're in 11th grade, they realize why they're there, but if they hadn't been doing what they need to do to get there, all of a sudden it's a struggle and it's not exactly what they, they're not in the place they wanted to be. They may not be ready to get a scholarship or that kind of thing. Their academic, they may have had the ability to get an academic scholarship, but they're not there because they didn't really buckle down. So you start looking at that and you say, well, what gets them involved? Well, those extracurriculars, those connections. And let me say, it's not only athletics, it's not only arts, and those are both critical. And you want to do a great job in both of them, in performing arts and in all the arts. It's also in your extracurricular academics. I was a student who, I was involved in athletics, but I also found a home in Scholars Bowl and in youth legislature and in in the government club and in those things that were actually academic extracurriculars. And they're important too. We want to do everything, our philosophy in Dublin and my philosophy everywhere then is if we do it, we want to do it well. But it's important for every student to be connected to that school, and that's one of the great ways to connect. It's also one of the great ways, by the way, that our teachers connect with students. Not just the ones who are involved in that activity, but it's those students who they kind of have a connection with at school. You want every child to feel like, there's some teacher there that they go, yeah, I know, I really, that teacher really cares about me. And when they show up at that extracurricular activity, it's almost like a parent showing up. It's very important. It builds those relationships that we have to build. Which takes me to the point that I am a believer in the idea of adult education started about 25 years ago, that for adult education you have to be the 3 R's, rigor, relevance, and relationships, and we've kind of taken that into the rest of education. And I believe that, but I believe it needs to be flip-flopped. It starts with relationships. All 3 have to be there, but there has to be the relationships. Students have to have relationships that are proper and that they know the teacher cares about them. And then secondly, there has to be relevance. What they need to understand, what they need to learn it. That's why I believe in project-based learning. And then thirdly, there has to be rigor. It can't just be do this worksheet. It has to be real learning. It has to be learning that kids care about and understand and feel like they get pushed and have to go somewhere that they didn't necessarily know they were going to go. So this gives us another opportunity to build those relationships through extracurriculars that are so critical to that academic success.
Mr. Cooper?
Dr. Ledbetter, I want to go back to the previous question a little bit on a couple comments you made about breaking rules with integrity, finding ways to get the yes, and empowering teachers in the classroom. You probably well know that we are very site-based managed here on a school basis. And so the ultimate authority, what my wife tells me, is in the classroom, because when the teacher shuts the door, they own it. So the other thing we have done here is made a strong commitment to technology as a learning and teaching multiplier. So the question I've got for you, when you have that level of empowerment down to including the classroom teacher, and you're trying to basically inject a new thing such as technology to push the district forward, and learning and teaching forward, you might run into some teachers who say, well, I've been doing the same thing for about 25 years and this always worked. I don't see a need to change at this point in my career. I don't shut my door and kind of just, I'll do what I need to do, but not what I necessarily have to do. So with that background, what experience have you had with incorporating technology in the classroom and ensuring teacher acceptance of that technology as a teacher, as a teaching and learning multiplier?
Well, first of all, that teacher that you're talking about, I think she used to work for me. But
I'm still listening.
I know that teacher, yes. I've been there as a principal, I've been there as a superintendent. And because, those are people who are my age, who I grew up with, and we came along in a different world. We came along in a world, a lot of us, where we were focused on content, especially at the high school level. We were focused on content. And our job was to put to cover the content, and the student job was to get it. And years back, school was really more of a sorter. It was all about sorting students and saying, okay, you're really good academically, you go here. You're in between, you can hit the community college, and maybe you need to go to technical school, maybe you need to go straight to work, and we kind of sort our kids out. And a lot of kids didn't finish. And now, we have some teachers who are really good teachers and really good people, but we're in a different time. Let me say, our schools, your school, my school, and probably every school you walk into is better than it's ever been, almost all of them. Public education is better than it's ever been. We're graduating more students than we ever have. Our students are learning more than they ever did. My 7th graders, what they have to learn to get into 8th grade is what my father had to learn to graduate, with the exception of Latin. And so that said, there's a lot of great things happening. However, the problem is we're on a growth curve about like this, or a rate of increase, and the world's changing like that. And so our kids we have to change what we're doing to make up that difference. And so as we look at that, we have to get our teachers focused on the things and the opportunities that we give them. To me, to not use technology today is akin to saying, 50 years ago, well, I'm not going to use a notebook and a pencil. We don't need that stuff. We were able to write with charcoal on a slate before. We can do that. So we have to get there, but we also have to realize too now, everybody's not going to go at the same pace. So if we're moving people in the right direction, then we're doing the right thing. One of the things I did as a principal, and this was a few years back, but we came along and everybody, when they first started technology, they used labs, right? Everybody had computer labs, and you take the kids to the computer lab, and teachers tended to take the kid to the computer lab and drop them off and say, see ya, I'll be back at the end of the period. Let that teacher or parapros in the computer lab take care of this, because it wasn't in my classroom. You're right, they walk in the classroom door, these 4 walls are mine, and I'm the king of this world or the queen of this world. And so to change that, we started, in trying to inject technology into the classroom. As a principal, I had an older teacher who had been around for many, many years and was a great teacher, but she did not want to touch technology until I finally got her to use the rolling laptop lab, get all the laptops in use, and all of a sudden those students that she had the most difficulty with were excited and to be able to use technology, and she went, wow, I should have used this a long time ago. So part of it is getting them to use it. I think a big piece of any professional development, technology or otherwise, is making sure that professional development is job embedded. So you make sure that those teachers are getting to see it happen with their students. I like to bring people to us, not take our teachers other places. Because when they see it and they say, okay, you're doing it with my students, I can do that too. Teachers I've never met a teacher who didn't want to be a good teacher. Anybody who doesn't want to be is not in it long. So when you focus them on the task at hand, and when they see a better way, they're going to go after it. They really have to be focused on here's the way to get there. We've done that through that way. As we've started our technology, I know y'all have done a lot with technology. As we started moving toward one-to-one, we did a lot of research, not only on devices that we use, but on how we get our teachers to use them. And one of the things that we did was look at a school in Cincinnati that's been doing one-to-one since 1995, Cincinnati Country Day School. And it was a private school, but they've been doing one-to-one for a long time. And they found a lot of things that worked and some things that didn't. And, they were able to tell us things like, make sure you got an 11-inch screen, because in high school, the kids are going to split screen, and they're going to have the teacher on one side, and they're going to use OneNote on the other to write, and be able to do the things they want to do. And so we were able to take that into account, so that they could actually, what was most effective for them. And so, and looking at it that way, and being able to say, okay, now I can tell this teacher who at first is saying, I really don't want to deal with technology, I like things my old way. Now, my English teacher doesn't have to take a stack of papers home. She takes home her device, and she takes her stylus and can write on those test papers just like she did in the old days. So she's changing, but the change is slower and easier to translate. And as she starts to see the things she can do, she starts to use it more. So we tried to do that and do those things. We also have used technology as a learning multiplier in some other ways. And this kind of ties into the earlier question about community and how we work with our community. We're the first school system this year in the state of Georgia to do Microsoft industry certifications in middle school. We're doing it in middle school. Our 8th graders, we now have a little over 80 students who've gotten there so far this year. It's been a great program because they can work at their pace. I have one young lady who's gotten 4. But what it also shows anybody who's interested in having a future technology jobs is we're going to have a labor force that can do it, and our students can learn as well as anybody else. It also made our teachers who were involved, who in August, after going through and taking the class and working and saying, our kids can't do this. They cannot do it. This is impossible. They're not going to do it. And now they're saying, wow. And other teachers are looking at it and going, that's amazing, and realizing how far the students are ahead of the teachers. And so the teachers are starting to realize, I need to take the leash off my students a little bit and let them run with some of the things that we have.
But how do you, as superintendent, ensure that technology is accepted and used by teachers effectively in the classroom?
Well, the first is job embedded professional development, okay? Like I said, going back there. The second is before we ever gave anything to a student, we gave it to teachers. We worked with our teachers on them. We had classes with them with that job embedded professional development. And then, yes, there are things they have, they're the menial tasks they have to do online anyway. And then as we have our principals, our assistant principals, me, as I go through classes and through schools, and central office people who see what's happening in classes as we evaluate and make sure that those things are being used. So it's part of evaluation as well, but it comes back to quality professional development to make sure that they're comfortable with it.
I can get off of this one because,
Yeah.
because we've made such a tremendous commitment on infrastructure and every aspect of technology here. And it's a natural human tendency for anybody who's being asked to change to be somewhat reluctant, particularly if it's something very new to them.
Sure.
So that's why I keep coming back to this thing. How do you as superintendent ensure that your support staff, which would be the IT and curriculum people, are successful in getting that technology? You're going to do professional development, you're going to get them all spun up, you're going to give them every opportunity to learn and be able to use it, but getting them to actually use it.
Getting them to the slow adopters. That comes back more on the curriculum end than the IT end, first of all, because they have to understand how it's going to affect curriculum. And so that comes back to also making sure that as we evaluate, as we watch, that we see what we're looking for. Anytime you walk through, you have look fors. Anytime you walk through classrooms or anytime you sit and do an evaluation, that's one of the things you have to be looking for as you do that. So you have to say, okay, it has to be in lesson plans as far as that goes. You look at those things, but you have to see it used. You have to see it used effectively. Now, that is the is the other end of the professional development and teaching them to be comfortable with it. That's then making sure that there are as a carrot and a stick, there's a stick to say, yeah, we do expect its use, and we're going to inspect what we expect, and otherwise it's not going to happen. And we understand that too, that we have to inspect to make sure things are done properly. If we do what we're supposed to do, as far as that goes, if we make sure that every level of the school system is focused on the level below. I mean, I believe as far as leadership goes, an inverted pyramid, where really the students are at the top, and the teachers have got to be focused on their needs, and the principal's got to be focused on the needs of the teacher, and making sure that they're focused on the student needs. And I have to be focused on what's happening with the principals, and that they're focused on the things they're focused on. If we do that, I don't want them focused on me saying, I need to know, I want to make you happy. If we're doing those things, then we're inspecting those things and making sure that happens.
So let me see if I can sum it up in one statement. Given the fact that teachers will have added facilities, professional development, and all this kind of thing, your role as superintendent would be one to set the expectation.
Yes, and the culture. And not just the expectation, but also the culture that not only is it going to be expected, but we're going to be immersed in it.
Thanks.
Dr. Ledbetter, one question. Do you consider yourself technology savvy?
That's a really good question.
Everybody's shaking
Don't
their
worry,
head
my
back
friends.
there.
Let me say, I think I use technology very much, and I think I use it fairly well. But now technology changes so fast. I would say I'm as technologically savvy as some of my students. At the same time, I think for most, I'm fairly technologically savvy. Yes, and it's one of the things as a superintendent today that I think is a great thing is that I'm sitting here, but if they need me in my school system tonight, they're going to get me, whether it's cell phone, whether it's text message, whether it's all the rest of the actual, they can send me emails, documents. Most of my documents I keep in Dropbox so that wherever I go, I can pull a document out. I know how to use and do the things I need to do. And so, yes, I use it, and I try to make sure that we encourage not only students to use it, but teachers and administrators to encourage students to use it. Because, it's today, when it's not like it was when we were growing up. They can whip out their cell phone and they can Google anything. And so the most critical piece for our students is not a knowledge of every inane fact. It's understanding of having a base of knowledge of our culture, and then understanding how to use what they have, and frankly, how to look at different sources and decide, is this a good source or is this not? And so being able to judge what they're looking at and decide what it is are more important today than knowing the exact time of the signature of the Declaration of Independence. Now, they don't know about when it was, but if they don't know, if they can't say 1776, if they might get 75 or 77, they can Google it real quick and figure that out. But being able to say, to be able to judge what they're looking at and be able to make good decisions based on what they have at their fingertips is very important.
Dr. Ledbetter, are your students issued tablets or laptops?
They are issued right now. It's actually my high school students. It's between a tablet and a laptop. It's actually a Dell Venue. It's actually a computer, but it looks like a tablet. They can snap on a keyboard and use it in other ways as well. But it actually has memory like a laptop, and that's what we chose to go with.
One other question. At your board table there in Georgia, does your board work off hard copies, or did they work off computers as far as board meetings are concerned?
All our board members have an iPad, and we send everything. We use eBoard for all of our board meetings. I don't know if you're all familiar with eBoard, but right, we use eBoard. We put our agendas on eBoard. We put all of our minutes on eBoard, and we put the agenda and minutes from all of our school governing teams on eBoard as well. And so while the board information that they have on eBoard can't be seen by others until after the board meeting, we send everything that way.
Thank you. Mr. Presley?
A little better, would you give us some examples where you were personally involved in leading the process to develop and successfully implement a school budget?
Sure. I've had a good bit of a good bit of work in there. I was assistant superintendent in Tallapoosa County, Alabama for 4 years, during which time, and it's a long story, but for 2 of those years, for all 4 years, I was in charge of curriculum instruction. For 2 of those years, I was also in charge of finance. We had spent in the 2 years before I was in charge of finance about 10% over budget each year and dipped into reserves. During the 2 years I was in charge of finance, we were able to put about 15% back into the reserves. So I understand the process very well, both here and in Georgia. And in Georgia, we've had 6 consecutive years of funding problems from the state. Now, while here, the state calls it proration, and they don't tell you till the middle of the year. In Georgia, it's the same thing, but they call it,
Lottery.
They call it austerity, and they tell you in the beginning. But the only difference, the difference is, I mean, the key is you're just not gonna get funded for everything you're supposed to get funded for. And so, we've had to deal with that, we've had to deal with those funding cuts. And the way we've done it there is, as I told you, as we try to empower our school level, we've brought our principals in, and we say, okay, here's your share by your FTE units and what you're funded. And looking at the funding formula, here's what you're funded, here's how much extra money we're putting in from the local level, and so here's your share of the cut. And we see a way for you to make the cut this way. And we show it to them, and we put it all up on the wall, and we show them everything, and then we let them go back to their school leadership team and decide if they want to look at it the way we're looking at it, or if they like to make cuts in different places. They know better than we do what their school needs. Last year, 5 of my 6 came back with a different way to make the cut, but they got the cut made. And so that's what we, from the central office, we have to make sure that we're running a budget that balances. And so as long as we get the cut made and it's most effective for the schools, that's what we're doing. And that's what we've been able to accomplish during our time there. And it's never fun when you have to cut. We love to have the problem of fighting over extra money. We haven't had that. But at the same time, we've been able to deal with, while we've had these budget cuts for 6 consecutive years, we've also had standards go up. And we've been able to meet that and to raise that. During that time, we've gone from a 59% graduation rate to 3 consecutive years in the 80s. And one difference I do want to point out to folks in Alabama is we don't get to count any special ed diplomas as graduates. So what looks like it'd be a little lower than some in Alabama, when you consider we probably have about 8% more. So our 86% would be closer to 94 if we were able to count our special ed diplomas. But we're very proud of that. Our teachers work very hard. Our schools have worked very hard, and there wasn't a magic bullet. There was a lot of old-fashioned schoolwork, a lot of good leadership in the schools, good discipline, a lot of extra work from teachers in helping every child meet their need, so after school and before school. So it hasn't been easy. My principal and I laugh about the fact that we won't go on the speaking tour about it, because nobody wants to hear it was a bunch of different hard work and everybody working together. Everybody wants a program or a magic bullet. We don't have that. But at the same time, we've been able to cut, reduce, and still move our school system forward as right for students.
Do you do so having a balanced budget?
Our budget is now balanced. Now, let me say, we have a deficit that we're coming out of, that we've had for several years, but our budget is balanced each year, yes, and we have done that to get where we are today.
Now, you talked about an earlier question about environment, themed schools, passionate teachers, utilizing situational leadership.
Right.
Now, with 17 schools, we have some very strong and passionate principals.
Yes.
And They don't mind disagreeing with you, very, professionally, of course, but they know how the school works.
Sure.
So I'll ask this question. Please name and describe a major decision you and your staff/principal, and I interject the word strongly disagreed upon, and yet was finally resolved.
That was really hard question, because to be honest with you, most of the time, as we sit down and we talk and we look at issues and problems, we come to consensus. And, but in talking, and I talked about this with some of my staff, I said, can y'all think of a time? And my assistant superintendent said, I got one. And he was a principal at an elementary school, and was an award-winning principal in an award-winning school. And at the time, we had a middle school that had issues, and I needed to make a change at the middle school. And I knew he was the guy who could change that school. But nobody in his school wanted him to leave, and he didn't want to leave. So I went and talked to him about it, and I said, I really need you here. And he told me later, he said, I thought you were trying to run me off. And so to build the trust with him, we talked about it and said, how do we get there and what do we want to do? I did a couple of things that are unusual in Georgia. It's not as unusual here. But in Georgia, most principals are on a one-year contract. I told him, I said, listen, I'm not interested in running you off. I'm not interested in having the test scores the first year to be your measuring stick. I said, I'll give you a 3-year contract. So you know you're safe. You know it's okay. And you go in there and change that school. And change what's happening there academically, change what's happening there behaviorally, change the culture within those walls. And he did. And he went in there and our behavior got much better. We went, our bullying incidents, our incidents of fighting dropped by over 80% in 2 consecutive years. Our academics shot through the roof. By the second year, we had much higher performance, not only in the meets category, in other words, in meeting what the state required, but in the exceeds category, which you have in Georgia on our CRCT, and students who are really performing at a high level. And that came from his leadership with the staff. And he also asked, he said, if I'm going to change things, I need to be able to have a couple of people that I know do great work in this area. And so we looked and we said, okay, well, you've got openings. And he hired the assistant principal was who he wanted, and the academic coach was who he wanted. And of course, we believe in principals. I believe in principals and leadership teams at the school, bringing the people that, working with the people that he wants to hire, that the school wants. They know better than I do. But that gave a level of trust, and he realized I wasn't trying to run him off. And in 3 years, he turned that school around. And which is why when I had an opening for assistant superintendent, it was like, come on, let's spread this all over. Let's get you, teaching everybody how you're doing what you're doing there. And he's my right hand today. But most of the time, we don't have strong disagreements, because when you sit down and you start looking at things, the things that are given to the school to make decisions on, they make decisions on. And it's not my place to say, don't do it that way. It may be my place to say, are you sure that's the way you want to do it? Let's talk about this. And we may talk a while, And my high school principal and I often have 45-minute or an hour discussions about issues. And but when we fleshed it out and we know each other well, and we know that we're not arguing, we're actually discussing. We're saying, okay, think about it this way, think about it that way. How do we get to the right answer? And we just don't have big conflicts over decisions that we're making most of the time. So it wasn't an easy one to come up with. That's the best answer I can come to.
Dr. Ledbetter, as our new superintendent and leader of our great school district, how would you initially approach your new position?
That is one, I'll tell you what I did in Dublin a little bit when I first went there, and it would be somewhat similar here. First of all, it'd be close to a year learning the school system, because you don't come in and change everything because you think you have all the answers. Every school system is different, every school is different, every community is different. So you have to learn what's working and what's not working. What do we need to stop? What do we need to start? What do we need to keep doing? Because we do it really well. And it takes a little time to get there. I would do the same thing as I did in Dublin, where I interviewed each board member, interviewed each central office staff member, interviewed each principal, and then interviewed some city leaders to make sure I knew what people were thinking issues were, to make sure I knew what they thought. Different people may want to tell me, hey, here's what you need to do, and well, it's good to hear that. That doesn't necessarily mean you do that, but it's good to hear that's what somebody thinks. And so the more data you collect, and then being regularly in the schools early especially, there are certain things that only the superintendent can do. And for example, in the last 3 years, I've testified or spoken before the House and Senate Education Committees in Atlanta. Well, they want to hear from the superintendent, they don't want to hear from somebody else. And I understand that. But also, early on, when you're trying to establish who you are and the culture that you want in the school system, you have to be seen in schools. Teachers have to know you care. It's been very important for me that teachers know that I'm a teacher, that I spent 11 years in the classroom. That when I come walking in the classroom to watch for a few minutes, I'm not walking in to say, gotcha, I'm walking in to see what's happening, because it's incredible to see what's happening, and when I see it, I can talk to people about it, and I can talk in an educated way about what I saw. But I think the fact that I've been there and done that gives me a credibility. When I ask my teachers, I know when I talk to my teachers in Dublin about things that we've got to get them to do, whether it's technology or whether it's something else, they understand that I've been there, and I'm not asking them that lightly, but I'm asking them that knowing what their load already is, and saying, still, knowing what your load is, this is important, and this is critical. And that's helped me a lot. That's given me the ability, the fact that when I talk with my custodians, and they know that I've stripped and waxed floors as a principal and as a teacher and a coach. I've helped custodians strip and wax floors. And I know that too. And I've cleaned toilets and I've done those things. They go, okay, he gets us too. And so being part of that, being part of knowing the job, understanding the job, and appreciating the job, I think is very important. It's been one of the things that's helped me to be effective throughout, as well as being a school leader and having been there. I was assistant superintendent, and in case you wonder, I look at resumes all the time when I do interviews, and anything that looks out of place, red flag, let me figure this out. I went from assistant superintendent to middle school principal, and that's not normal. But it's because my track to assistant superintendent wasn't normal. I was an assistant principal, teaching one class, being assistant principal and coaching. And the superintendent called me and said, I want you to come to the central office as curriculum director. And I ended up doing it. And after 4 years, as I said, doing curriculum, 2 of those also doing finance, I realized I wanted to be a superintendent one day, and I had not been a principal, I had not led a school, and I needed that experience. So as we were getting ready to start a middle school, I asked the superintendent if I could apply. She allowed me to, and I spent 3 years as a middle school principal, then one as a high school principal. And those were very critical, I think, to my success and to my development as a leader.
As a follow-up. Now, please correct me if I'm wrong. In your resume, you taught in high school and also middle school, if I'm not mistaken, but elementary, not so much.
Not as much. I did spend a year with kindergarten PE, but really not as much.
Okay. One reason why I asked that question, with a superintendent, how do you equate that where principals in elementary schools feel like they don't have fair representation in central office or in leadership?
Well, one of the things, first of all, that I try to do everywhere I've been is make sure I have people around me who fill in my gaps. And I've got to be willing to understand, I don't know everything about elementary. I don't know everything about being an elementary principal. But frankly, let me say this. I don't know everything about teaching English. I'm a history teacher, I mean, I still say I can walk into a history class today and teach history, and I'm an expert in that. I'm a historian first, and so I can do that. But I have to be willing to understand, and you have to be, I hope, willing to understand as a board, that you employ a group of professionals and people who are the best at what they do and the experts at what they do in that classroom, in that school leadership, and assistant leadership. And so it starts with respecting that, and with listening. And just as you make decisions based on what you hear and people, explain, here's the reason we're asking you what you're asking. There are times I have to do that as well, that I have to say, I don't know everything about elementary or other things. If you come in and start talking about calculus, I probably, my eyes are going to roll back in my head. But at the same time, I got to have students who learn calculus, and so I'm not going to teach them that, but I'm going to make sure that I'll listen to people who are doing it and say, what do you need to be effective at your job?
Mr. Kelly?
Dr. Ledbetter, what would you think are the top 3 challenges in our district currently?
I'll put those, and I may answer a little differently than most people. First is the new normal in education funding. We've been through tough times in funding, but we're all hoping that all of a sudden the money starts flowing again. But the truth of the matter is we're in a new normal, and we have to be ready to make decisions based on that. We have to be able to prioritize and say, well, how do we make sure we're doing what's right for our students, and how do we make the resources that we have go as far as they possibly can to do everything we can for our students. So it's a different world than it used to be, and we have to recognize that and make plans according to that. Secondly would be growing positively, and that is anytime you have growth, it's change. But let me also say, any organization that doesn't change is dying. We're not where we used to be. None of us are, and so growth is a piece of it. Growing in a way where your growth is something that's positive, where you make sure, and all those things that are challenges are also opportunities, and that we make sure to come together, to collaborate, to talk to each other, to hear stakeholders, and then say, how do we come to a decision to build a consensus? That's one of the things that I have had the most success at, is building consensus among stakeholders for solutions that maybe I didn't ever think of myself, or maybe I thought of it part way, but as we got together, we said, well, if we twisted it this way, a little that way, it actually comes out much better. And so being able to build consensus and get people together so that the growth and the changes that take place are positive and help strengthen the system and don't take away from it. At the same time, the third that I'm going to say is, and y'all go with me here for just a second, is paddling faster than the current. There used to be a time when a buddy of mine and I did a lot of canoeing, and we'd get into the little creeks and rivers, and I will say we did something nobody thought was possible. We were told by a guy it wasn't possible. We lost a canoe in the Nantahala. It was found 3 days later. But at any rate, one of the things you learn in paddling in swift water is if you're not going faster than the water, you don't determine where you go. Changes are happening in education. This is not the same education that we were in 10 years ago. It's not the same we were in 20 years ago. It's not the same education or society we're going to be in 10 years from now. So as educators and as professionals and as people who care about our communities and our students, we have to drive the change. And we have to be able to say, let's make sure that the changes that we make are good changes and are positive and are going to do what we want for our community and for our students. And if we don't do that, the water's going to push us where it wants to go. And that's not a good thing, not for anybody. And so and when we go back to Mr. Cooper's question about the teacher who doesn't want to change, this is the critical issue. We have to change, and we have to look, and we have to make sure that the changes that we make are the right ones. And some things are going to get thrust upon us if we don't, and we don't want to go there. So those to me are the 3 key issues for this school system.
For the purpose of this question, I think it specifically asked about our individual districts.
Now,
So
well,
you're saying those 3 things.
for Hoover, yeah, growing positively. That includes things that y'all have worked at, and of course I've done my research. I know there've been struggles with looking at busing and struggles with looking at rezoning and those things. So you say, how do you do those things in a way that's good and that's positive and that gets everybody to where they go, okay, we live with this, and this is a good solution. I'm not telling you, oh, let me throw out the answer for you. I know the answer. I'm telling you that when you bring people together and we work on an answer, we'll come to an answer that everybody goes, once everybody understands the depth of the problems and the nuances of the problems. Because it'd be nice if everything was black and white, yes or no, make it all easy. But nothing that comes to a school board or a superintendent is. If it was nice and easy, it would have been decided a long time ago. Principals love to solve problems. They don't like anything to come to the superintendent. So what comes to us are dilemmas. And the way we solve dilemmas are finding the best answer that we can get in that gray area that where there may not be a perfect answer. But to do that, we have to get together and make sure that people come together and understand why we're where we are and why and how we need to go to that next step and how this is the best way.
Thank you.
As we talk about challenges real quick here, you alluded earlier to your participation in unitary status achievement by the Dublin School District. We're about to embark on the same thing. Is that a top 3 kind of challenge, or is that something that's just a natural progression that we've all worked through over the last 30+ years?
You know, and I'm going to say this, and I hope you'll hear me the right way when I say this, because I don't want to diminish the challenge. But to me, it wasn't hard. To me, it was very simple. There are these 5 green factors. Let's meet them. Let's do what they're asking us to do, and let's make sure that we do it in such a way, and let's be transparent and lay out there, here's what we're doing, and here's why we're doing it. And as we did that, they all went, okay, and we were able to move forward. And so it wasn't a hard thing to do, and so while it's an important thing to do, it's a very important thing to do, for a lot of reasons. I don't see it as overwhelmingly difficult.
Good rubric, right?
Right. It's a lot of copies, I'll say that.
So the state of Georgia is considered as unitary status?
No, sir, no, sir. My school system.
Your system, not schools, your whole system?
My school system is attained unitary status. The school system I was in before, when I was assistant superintendent, we achieved unitary status in Tallapoosa County. And so while the court case that covered Tallapoosa County also had green factors, as y'all do, looked at the green factors. The factors were, one was different in Georgia. They used a different court case to apply, but it was virtually the same, and it was the same work. And frankly, it was just showing that, because this is a good school system that's been doing the work. A lot of times what happens is we haven't documented the work. And so documenting and making sure that we show them the things that we're doing, make sure we do the right thing, and we meet that.
Mr. Cooper?
Back to me again.
Yes, sir.
The elevator speech. What are your strengths and weaknesses as a superintendent?
My weakness is that by nature, I tend not to celebrate the victories. I tend to be looking at the next challenge. We got that done, good, great job, check it off, keep going. And for the culture of an organization, there has to be some celebration, there has to be some patting people on the back, there has to be some good job, guys, y'all did great. And so I make sure that I point that out to the people that I work with, and that I have people around me who help grab me and say, hey, we need to make sure that we're telling people, you know, that we're doing what we need to do to celebrate those victories. I think my strength comes back to what I was just talking about, actually building consensus. Having a vision. I've figured out over time that I can see possibilities that some people maybe don't see as well. So being able to bring forth a vision, to talk about where we can go, and then building consensus, hearing all the stakeholders, making them feel like they have a valid voice, and bringing them to be part of the process, and really understand the big picture. You know, I don't think you can be a principal or a superintendent without understanding very quickly that until I've heard from everybody, I really don't know what happened. And you hear from people who are all telling you the truth, but they're telling you the truth as they saw it. And so you get different pieces, and by the time you hear the whole thing, you go, oh, I get it, yeah, I see what happened. And so being able to understand that, being able to understand that you don't go off half-cocked, that you don't just look at this little thing, you look at what is the big picture. And you know what I've learned through time, there are times that even when I think I do a good job of understanding the big picture, there were things at play I never had any idea about, you know, and you go, wow, learn a lesson on that one, let me do more homework next time. So, being through those things, going through those things, I guess those are the things I'd say are my strengths.
Dr. Ledbetter, we've talked about that our system and our city not only expects but demands excellence in everything that we do. Mr. Cooper's talked about technology and the money that we've invested in that. You mentioned 3 topics, 2 of which one was growing positively and another one was paddling faster than the current. How do we do that and keep a balanced budget?
By setting priorities. I mean, you have to say, the bottom line is the bottom line. This is what we have. We can't go past there. So you then set priorities the same way any other organization does. But those priorities have to have input from the people who understand best what's going to affect their student learning, what's going to affect what we can do. So those priorities have to not come from the top down, but they have to grow from the bottom up with input from the top. Because there are pieces, one of the things we learn as a superintendent is while those teachers know what's happening in that classroom and what's going to affect their students more than anybody else, and those principals know their building better than anybody else, there are also bigger picture pieces that sometimes teachers don't know or understand. When we decided to put in IB, I had teachers at my high school who thought it was crazy while we were cutting budgets to spend money on IB. 3 years later, they're looking back and going, and they're the biggest cheerleaders, you know, they're the ones calling me and telling me what's happening in IB classes. And they're the ones who are excited what's happening, not just in the IB classes, but also with industrial development, because they didn't see that piece of it. And so when we all get together and we all talk about it and we bring together the different views, we can set priorities once we understand everything. But we have to get that, we have to bring those pieces together. But we have to set priorities and say we can't have everything we want. It's one thing to have, you know, we want to make sure, and most of us do, have enough to have everything we need, and some won't. But we're not going to be able to have everything we want, and that's always the case. It doesn't matter how much money we'd have, you know, there'd be some wants we wish we could do that we wouldn't have enough money for. So it's tough when you're doing it, but it's very doable.
You mentioned that it's all about setting priorities.
Yes.
Every school and every grade level is going to have different priorities. How do you mesh those together to find out what is the priority?
That's why I say you've got to bring people together and say, what are those priorities? All right, now, for example, one of my elementary schools did not have an academic coach. 2 did. That principal came to me and said, hey, they got academic coaches. I want an academic coach. I said to her, great, have an academic coach. If you'll notice, they have 26, 27 students in their 4th and 5th grade classes. You have 20. Go to 26 or 27 and hire an academic coach. Great job, go for it. And she went, oh, well, the 4th and 5th grade I've got right now, I need smaller classes. That smaller class size is more important than an academic coach. And I said, okay, great. That's a school level decision, and you can make the call on what's good for your school. But, you know, within the budget, you can do that, and you can make that decision. But you don't get to just say, well, I need an academic coach, they have it. You make budget decisions and priority decisions there. Her priority was, I need smaller class sizes because of the group that I have going through right now. Need to be in smaller classes. Okay, that's fine, no problem. But my others said, we need an academic coach working with all teachers more than that. We let those schools set those priorities and let them move from there. So the things that they can set, we try to let them set. The things that we had to set, you know, we talk a lot in our system. There was if you've read Malcolm Gladwell's Blink, he talked about command without control. That's the governance structure we try to have, where we're setting command, we're setting where we're going to go. This is where we expect, this is what's going to happen. But the control's got to go to those people at the level that are making it happen, because there are going to be things that I can't be telling them what to do all the time.
Thank you.
In the prior statement, you talked about how you have a scenario a particular school was having some challenges, and went to the principal and tried to work things out. Took off the table their actual job and gave a 3-year contract, so that wouldn't be a burden. So on that same topic, when it comes to the role of superintendent, would you consider a portion of your compensation package being tied to a mutual agreement upon stretch goals that define exceptional performance?
I want to give a short answer and an expansion.
Okay.
The short answer is yes, but the expansion is this. There's not a goal that I'll make as superintendent that I'll do. It takes the organization of people working throughout the organization. And so my question would be, I would ask the board to also consider as part of that, being able to have some sort of a process that would go by school that meets goals for a compensation that helps teachers and administrators. I've got a friend in Marietta City who is looking at changing compensation for teachers. And one of the things that they're looking at is a compensation by school for when they meet goals and do the things they need to do, or meet stretch goals, that money is put there for teacher grants. So the money doesn't go directly to employees, but it does go into that school, and it helps them say, okay, if we meet these goals, then we can get a grant for our classroom to do the next thing. And it motivates teachers, but it also builds a team, because if I'm the only one getting a reward for the work that everybody in the school system's doing, you know, there can be a little bit of a rift cost, and that I would rather not have as part of the team. But so I would like to find a way to say, sure, I'm happy with that, because I believe in school improvement and I believe in incentives. But I'd like to make sure there's a way to incentivize those who are doing the work so that they feel like they're part of the team as well.
Does it go back to, because each individual school has different challenges. Setting that parameter, of course, they can't be the same, I would not think.
Well, you know, you just like when you're working with any student, I would think that your parameters would go to improvement. So how much did you improve? How much did you get there? And what did the school do? And I believe in school goals rather than individual goals for teachers, because as a principal, I want my principal to be able to go to the PE teacher and say, I need you to help work with a group of students right here who need some extra help. And the PE teacher not say, oh, well, that's really not not my thing. When it's one team working together, when the PE teacher realizes that English test is his or hers as much as the English teachers, when the whole school is benefiting from what happens, you build a team that supports each other. So you say, yeah, I can pitch in here, and I can help here, and you build a team that works. And so I really believe that having a team that's professional and collegial and works together is something that's very important, and the things we do need to be purposeful to cause that.
I actually have one more question.
Certainly, go ahead.
Within that same bracket, with different schools, it said individual goals. How do you navigate that where X school may be considered excelling, and Y school may be considered at this particular level? How do you communicate that to show the greatness in each individual school?
Well, what really matters in education, in my opinion, is value added. What have we added to that student? You're getting into my personal platform now. I believe I could take my 2-year-old, soon to be 3-year-old grandson, put him in the yard and let him play for a year, and he's going to grow and learn some things. Okay, he's going to be a little different than he was a year ago. So have I added value beyond what a kid gets just from having another year on earth? That's what matters. Now, yes, I've had the discussion especially when I was a social studies teacher, and I was teaching 8th grade, and my cousin was teaching 8th grade, and I was in rural Tallapoosa County, and my cousin was in Mountain Brook. And I asked, and I know she's a great teacher. And I said, you know, what do you think, the students walk into your class, how much of the information that's on the test do they know in 8th grade when they walk in? You know, she said, probably 90%. And I said, mine walk in knowing about 25%. I said, now mine walk out knowing 75%, and yours walk out knowing, you know, she said, what they were. She said, oh, 96, 97%. Okay, who's the better teacher? I can't tell you. You know, I mean, so you've got to be willing to look at that and say, where are the students now? And if they're really high flyers, you got to take that into account for that teacher. That teacher needs to take high flyers and push them further, but there's only a certain amount that you're testing. You know what I'm saying? You understand what I'm saying? There's a limit to test. And if they're flying much lower, but you have huge increases, you want to reward that too. So you got to be purposeful in the standards that you set and be able to say, so that's why it takes some time. It's not an easy, you know, sit down, say 5% period growth. It needs to be something that we say, let's come together and let's make something that's meaningful.
Dr. Ledbetter, what are some ways you will be a visible figure within the community for students and parents alike to see your involvement and participation in the community and not just sit in your office?
I don't think you can be a leader and sit in the office, first of all. And which is, like I say, again, going back to that technology, you know, that the cell phone in my pocket means I can be tracked down wherever I might be. But as far as being seen in the community, there are a lot of ways. I am involved in a lot of different things in our community, civic organizations. I'm on the United Way board, on the Chamber of Commerce, been on the board of directors there. Been involved with a lot of different things, community mental health. And so you serve where you can serve and help your community, first of all. You make yourself available to serve. Every chance I get, I speak to civic groups. They're always looking for a speaker. Most of them meet once a week or so and are happy to have you at least, you know, once a year kind of thing at least in a rotation to talk about the things that are going on, because most people don't have a clue about all the great things that are happening within the walls of our schools. So I do that as often as possible. At the same time, and going back to what I was saying before about getting all of our school leadership involved in the community is very important as well. It multiplies, in a way, it multiplies my influence as a school leader because they're all involved and we try to speak, you know, when we talk about the schools, we try to speak from the same tune music. And frankly, living, working, worshiping, shopping in the community are very critical. I solve a lot of problems and prevent a lot of problems in the grocery store. There are a lot of people who will come up and talk to me in the grocery store that will not walk in my office. And I kind of take pride in being very open and having an open door and, you know, I'm very approachable. People won't walk in the office so very often.
Does it matter which aisle you're on?
Yeah.
Not really. Sometimes it matters where they track me down to.
So they don't just show up in the wine aisle.
That might happen too, you know. But you know, those are important conversations and important to have. Y'all don't think I'm crazy. Everybody does when I'm telling this, but I'm telling you, every time I speak, I give out my cell phone number because if somebody is upset enough to want to talk to the superintendent, I need to talk to them. And then I may end up rerouting them back to the school, go back and talk to the principal, talk to the teacher and the principal before you come to me. But it's important that they get me, and it's important that I can prevent issues when I can. And you'd be surprised how people will honor that by knowing they can get me. They don't call me all the time. You know, they want to know that I'm accessible. It's very important. I do have. We have monthly, what we call superintendent coffee talks. Had them in at several of the banks, in churches, in different places around the community, the housing authority, different places where different times of day, each time we have it, with no agenda. We walk in, we have some cookies and some coffee or some tea and just sit down and see who shows up. And I talk to them about the things we're doing in the school system, and I listen to what they have to say. And sometimes, one person shows up, sometimes several. But the fact that they know that they can come and talk and that they can hear and have my ear is very important. And it makes a difference, and it's something that we'll continue to do. So we really try to reach out. Most problems in any organization that occur are communication problems. We can't communicate well enough, and we work really hard at it. But I've also found it's a little bit like mowing the grass. I can do it today, and I can't say, well, I communicated, I'm done. 3 days from now, the grass has got to be cut again, and it's the same with communication. We've got to tend to it all the time and find more and better ways to do so.
So you consider yourself a very approachable superintendent then?
I consider myself that, and I try to take, but also try to take action to make myself more approachable, because I've realized sometimes people don't see me the same way I see myself.
Dr. Ledbetter, that concludes our questions this evening. One final question that I have for you. Do you have any questions for the board at this time? And don't make it really hard, okay?
Okay, all right. Just a couple. How do you feel about superintendent involvement in state and national education leadership organizations? It's been very important for me. I've served on the governance superintendent advisory council. I served on the board of directors of the School Superintendents Association, served on the advisory council for the School Board Association. I've just been selected to be part of the Century Club 100 there where we're kicking around to be an educational thought leader, to understand what's happening and to hear from others and to hear from my peers and to pick up things that I can bring back to my school system and then know about the issues that are taking place around the country, because some of the issues that I haven't had yet, or that I didn't have yet 2 years ago, we now have, but others had already dealt with them, and so I had ideas of what things that were coming. So to me, it's been very important, and I'd be interested in knowing how the board feels about that.
Are you talking about traveling the country?
No, I'm talking about being part of those organizations and making sure that, for example, if as superintendent of Hoover City Schools, I'm invited by the governor to serve on a panel or have the opportunity to once a year go to AASA or to be involved, like in leadership for GSSA, that happens when we have our superintendent meetings. So it's not extra travel, but it does sometimes require a commitment and a time, and so I never want to commit to something without a board knowing that I'm willing to do that, that I want to do that.
I think for me personally, I think it'll have to be a time commitment. I mean, I think each organization or each committee that you choose or want to serve on, I think it would depend on what kind of time we're talking about, because obviously you're our superintendent and this is first and foremost. But for me personally, I would love to have Hoover City Schools superintendent represented in a lot of other different organizations. So I guess for me, and I'll let the gentlemen speak if they wish, but I think it would probably have to be a time commitment, take it on an individual basis. I mean, are you talking about 20 organizations, or are you talking about
No.
2 organizations?
No, you're talking a couple of organizations. You're talking about
Okay.
state and local. And then the things that come up occasionally through state government, like say the governor or that kind of thing, when you have the opportunity to be a voice at the table and the changes that are taking place.
Absolutely, absolutely. Obviously, this is something that you've been involved in Georgia.
Yes,
It's something that you're passionate about, and it's something that can better this school district.
right.
I have no problems with that personally. Gentlemen, do you have
Of course, as you can see, we're very stingy. I use that word. So, focus is so much on our kids and our system. But of course, being a part of those organizations puts you on the front end of knowing what's going on that aids the school long term. So, I don't have a problem with that, and you're all professionals, and just know that, Hoover is #1 school in the nation, in my opinion.
Right.
any other comments?
Yeah, I don't think it's only acceptable, I think it's important. I think what Donna was alluding to perhaps, or she wasn't all alluding to it, and I don't think your interpretation, my interpretation of what you just said is about you. It's about, well, this district pushes the envelope in so many different directions, trying to make better, raise the bars, increase performance and all. If you don't know what's coming, if you don't see around the bend, you know, you're gonna hit a landmine that's gonna slow things down. And so I think it's imperative that you be in touch with as many people as you can reasonably afford to do time-wise to derive whatever it is you need to derive to keep leading the district.
Ms. Frazier, remember we were in a conference in South Alabama earlier this year, and it was a lot of personal pride to see Amanda Stone come and speak in front of that whole group.
Right.
So not only being a part of that, but being thought well enough because of that to speak back to the group. So very important.
Well, Dr. Ledbetter, you're.
Can I
Yes,
ask
sir.
one other question?
Oh, I'm sorry,
I'm
yes.
sorry, there's one, I'm sorry, I apologize.
I'm sorry.
But this is, and I've alluded to this already, I've talked a little bit about it. But as I've talked about building consensus, I really don't see myself as a change agent. I see myself as a facilitator of conversations. And basically I want to know that as a board and as a community, you're willing to take on some really honest conversations to find unique solutions for the unique challenges. Because that's the only way I've found that I can make things work in a way that's effective and that finds answers that are beyond my control and my ability to find on my own. And so I just wanted to, I mean, I guess I'm not asking you if you're willing to do that. I'm kind of saying, understand that that's the process that I believe in and the process I've been successful with. And I wouldn't want a board not to know that and to come in and say, what in the world is this guy doing? So, you know, the way I built consensus is by bringing people to the table and saying, let's talk. And let's be brutally honest. And let's be honest about our warts as we talk together in here, you know, inside, so we can find solutions that as we go out and work and make them work. And that's how we've gotten where we've gotten today.
Are you asking if this board thinks outside the box?
Well, sort of, and I'll say, my assistant superintendent, I borrowed this phrase from him. He talks a lot about we don't think outside the box, we set out to build new boxes. And so that's, you know, you gotta have some structure sometimes, I understand that. But sometimes you have to say where the structure is now is not where it needs to be.
Paulette, past president, just close your ears for 1 second, okay? This is by far the best board I have ever served with. So I just want you to know that they are willing to do whatever it takes to take this school district to the next level and beyond. So I can absolutely say every single one of these guys are totally committed to this school district and will do what it takes.
With what you just alluded to is something that, unless we just tell you straight up the answer to your question, you alluded to the fact that most problems occur from lack of or insufficient communication. And I think I can speak for everybody here. Open, consistent communications, consensus building is super duper important and needed and necessary to take to the next level.
And maybe it's an oversimplified question I'm about to ask you. Do you have a problem with telling the board no?
No.
We're good, I'm fine.
I think that's what he was asking.
Yeah, that was simple.
Any other questions? Well, you're our very first finalist, and we are right on schedule. And thank you so much. You can take a breather. And upstairs in our tech room at 7:30 is a meet and greet. Everyone here is invited to go upstairs. I'd like you to have an opportunity to shake Dr. Ledbetter's hand and ask whatever questions, comments, whatever. Just, you know, I want everyone to have an opportunity to meet him tonight. So please feel free to take about a 20-25-minute break, and we'll meet you upstairs. Okay? Thank you very much.
Thanks, sir.